Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to end tonight's show with a couple of minutes on housing policies, and I think what is probably the number one issue in Ontario today, and maybe also in Montreal and Vancouver, which is housing affordability. And you know, I've done a couple of shows on climate change, and I really think that climate change is sort of the issue for our generation nationally, if not globally. But I think that housing affordability may be the issue of our generation provincially, and certainly in the Greater Toronto Area. And why do I say that? Because I think that we have created a situation, and it's my generation primarily that have created a situation where we could afford a good house. A reasonable person on a one income household in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s could afford a house in Toronto, in suburbia, could afford a house with a 2-car garage and a pool. Today you can't. We have stolen that opportunity from the younger generation. And how have we stolen that opportunity? We have stolen it not through developers not building enough homes, not through there not being enough land, not because there's not enough room in the sky. It's because local governments have created huge amounts of red tape, regulation, and roadblocks to development. I really firmly believe, and CMHC and lots of other economists have proven this out in study after study after study, that lack of supply is the issue, and the lack of supply is something we've caused in ourselves with the local governments that we've elected. And the NIMBYism that we've created that has been the catalyst or the effect on those councillors and those mayors and those planning commissions and those planners that have resisted development and resisted increasing supply. It takes 2 or 3 times as long to get a development approved as it does to actually build that development. Think of that. It takes longer, 2 or 3 times as long to get the stupid thing approved as it does to actually build it. That's crazy. And it's millions and millions of dollars to go through the process of submitting plans, planning rationales, getting them approved, going through community meetings after planning meetings, after more planning meetings, after more planning reviews, and then potentially getting objected to, and then you got to appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board or the Ontario Land Tribunal or whatever the new organization is that different organizations, different provincial governments and local governments set up to impede your ability to actually build. And why is that? You know, when you think, and I've interviewed a couple of economists that have stated this, when you think about housing should logically go up as GDP goes up. There's no logical reason why, there's not a scarcity of land. There may be a scarcity of land on waterfront. There may be a scarcity of land near transit stations, but we're building more of them. But there's not a scarcity of land. Land is plentiful. And we can build higher and we can build denser. And so it's not the lack of available opportunities. It's the time to get those entitlements. And so if housing really should go up by inflation or GDP, and it's not really, a productive, innovative part of the economy, it's just, a house. When you think about a house, frankly, we probably have become less productive because we're building more square footage for less people as we have, smaller units of households, a smaller number of people in households. So when you think about it in pure productivity terms, we're probably less productive today than we may have been a generation ago. So we are investing huge amounts of money in an unproductive part of the economy that should be going up by inflation, and it's going up by 40% over the course, compound over the course of the last decade or so. Why? To what benefit? So NIMBYism has said, I don't want this tower in my neighborhood. I don't want this townhouse development in this neighborhood. I don't want this big development in my neighborhood. And they think that it's going to destroy their value in their home or destroy their community or something like that. And so what they're doing is they're influencing the local councillors and the local planning councils to either not approve and or delay the approval, or to negotiate for less stories or less density or less something or other. And by definition, what they're doing is, it's like that gatekeeper that says, once I get through the gate, I want to close the gate and not let anyone else through. What they're doing, what we're collectively doing, is we are making it far more difficult for young people, far more difficult for renters, far more difficult for immigrants to ever afford the lifestyle. And a lot of us couldn't afford to buy the homes that we own today if we had to buy it at current market value. We're just lucky that we bought it 10 or 20 years ago. And I think about these politicians that are supporting this. They've created this housing crisis. They keep on blaming other people, and they never look in the mirror and blame themselves. They blame greedy developers. They blame low interest rates, even though CMHC said low interest rates, have only been a certain portion of the impact. They blame foreign buyers, even though CMHC and lots of other economists say that maybe 5-10% is caused by foreign buyers or people that keep houses vacant. The vast majority, every economist, every study says the vast majority is caused by lack of supply. And so these politicians that are saying and blaming other people are lying to themselves and lying to us. And why? So there is a certain amount of net worth that the people that have already bought their houses are enjoying as their house values go up. And they are the people that are older and tend to vote. And so therefore, you could argue that those politicians are catering to the wealthy that are established and that are more prone to vote. But isn't that sad if that's true? Isn't that incredibly sad? And I got to tell you, I think there's a moral issue here. And, we've talked about this issue in the press and in Economists and in the 53, recommendations that the Ontario Housing Task Force made, a lot from an economic standpoint, supply, demand, etc. But I think we got to start talking about the moral issue here. Because really what it is, it's an intergenerational transfer of wealth where people of my age have stolen wealth from the next generation because of the lack of supply that has jacked up the house values that the current older generation are going to enjoy. And the younger generation are going to have to, and we've heard these statistics, they're going to have to save for 25 years just to afford a down payment on a house in the Greater Toronto Area. And that's making over $100,000. Two income families. We have made life unaffordable. We have made the opportunity for immigrants to afford a house, if they're not wealthy, in the Greater Toronto Area unaffordable. We have made it unaffordable for renters to get out of the cycle of renting all the time and to actually afford a house. There's a moral issue here. And the politicians that are on the progressive side of things are the ones that are arguing often the most against increasing supply and reducing the red tape and regulation. And they're the ones that one would have typically thought would have been more actually encouraging to, moral issues that benefit the less advantaged in society. And it's the right that have been the ones that have been of late wanting to reduce the barriers for housing, which arguably is more laissez-faire, is more capitalist, more free enterprise, but actually probably hurts the oligopolic interests of some developers and some landowners. And so I'm just astounded by this issue, and that more people don't understand how critical it is for our young people to be able to afford a reasonable life, for our newcomers to be able to afford a reasonable life, for our renters to be able to get into the home ownership. And why is it that for some reason, older people that bought their homes 20 years ago think that they've got this right to this unbelievable, increase in their net worth just because of housing appreciation, when you think of it, that housing appreciation should be just going up by inflation. Housing should be there, not as an investment, just as a place to live. And I think it's because some of these politicians, number one, are catering to the established, older, richer voter, and they won't admit it, but they are. Number two, don't understand basic supply and demand. Number three, are not thinking through the moral situation that if it was homelessness, if it was poverty, if it was so many other issues, progressive income tax, they would be very supportive of making it easier for people at the bottom end of the income spectrum, the income scale, to do well. But for some reason on housing, they just don't see it. And so I think that they're committing a terrible injustice, an incredible and terrible injustice on our young people, on the people that are newcomers to our society. And I guess that's the biggest issue, is that what it is it's the future voters that are being hurt. And so they're only catering to the current voters, and only to the current voters that are voting, which is, 20, 30, maybe 40% of the electorate, and tends to be older, whiter, more established, etc. And I think we got to call out these people, and we got to say, not only are you doing the dumb economic thing and creating huge amounts of regulation and red tape for zero benefit, creating a crisis of housing affordability that is an own goal. It's self-inflicted. It's a huge mistake on ourselves. But worse than that, you're committing an injustice, a moral injustice against young people, against newcomers, against renters. And that's just wrong. And we've got to tell them it's wrong. And, housing affordability is one issue, and supply and demand and regulations and red tape and NIMBYism that as I said, mean that it takes 2 times to 3 times as long to get a development, a condo, a housing, a townhouse development, whatever, approved as it is to actually build it. But this issue on development fees is very similar. Development fees were originally put in place to be a charge on new development such that they could pay for the infrastructure that new development would bring. And yet they become slush funds. They become a way of just increasing general revenue, and they become a way of keeping property taxes down, further benefiting older established people and harming young newcomers, renters, and young people. And the proof that it's a slush fund is that development fees are so different, dramatically different, like 6 times higher in Mississauga than in Burlington, or something like that, and other crazy statistics around the Greater Toronto Area. And the fact that they don't get spent on actual infrastructure, they get just spent on, and not infrastructure for that new development, which is what they should do. They're being spent on infrastructure, if they are spent on infrastructure, for the benefit of the established society, like new police stations and things like that. But they're just going into general tax revenue, and they're lowering property taxes that are charged on everyone else, which is wrong, because you know what? If we want a social good, like a new LRT or a new highway or a new park or a new library or a new police station, everyone should pay, not just newcomers. And by definition, when you put all that development fee on the newcomers, you jack up the price of that new condo or that new apartment or that new house or that new townhouse. And again, we harm housing affordability. And again, you've got these politicians, local politicians, are saying, oh, if we lower development fees, it's going to be, this windfall profit to developers. Again, people that don't understand basic economics. If you increase development charges, people are just going to jack up their prices. Consumers are going to pay more. If you decrease development charges, people are going to reduce their prices. Maybe not immediately right away, though I think it's going to be pretty soon. And the reason why is because competition will come into the marketplace. And people will keep on entering into that marketplace until the average returns that developers make are average returns, not outlandish returns. And so therefore, if there's a chance that someone could come in and build a new townhouse development and price 10 or 20% lower because they've got development fees that have gone down by that amount of money, they'll do it. And then once they do that, the market price will come down and everyone will have to do it. And that's, again, basic economics. And so these politicians that say things like, oh, reducing development fees are going to be a windfall to developers are just plain wrong. I think, therefore, we've got a real issue. Housing affordability is probably the crisis of our generation, provincially or in the Greater Toronto Area. And we got to address it, and we got to get more serious about this. And it shouldn't be this big partisan issue. It should be something that we all rally around, just like climate change is nationally and globally. And we should not, we should be disgusted by the idea that we've created this system that makes it unaffordable for younger people to be able to afford the Canadian dream of homeownership, even if it's a small condominium that they can't afford. And the solution is faster approvals, less regulation, more height, more density. It's not building suburbia all the way to Parry Sound. We can't, and the infrastructure that we'd spend if we did it through suburbia would be far greater. I've been in a bunch of community meetings recently where people talk about, well, we don't have the appropriate infrastructure for this development. Yeah, probably true. But that's what the development fees are for. That's what government's for, is to actually build the infrastructure. There's some development going on where we're adding tens of thousands of people with no new transit, no new roads. It's terrible. So yes, I think that we need more density and height around transit stations and transit nodes. I think we need a general as of right ability for people to put more housing in single family home areas with a lot less regulation, a lot more flexibility. And I do think that we need some more suburbia because some people do want the big house with a pool. I know I do. And so we've got to see this almost akin to climate change as a defining issue of our generation, maybe not globally, but certainly locally. And people that don't understand the situation, we should be, you're a housing affordability denier. And we should be calling them out and saying, get on board. Let's get rid of the regulation and red tape that benefits nobody and just jacks up housing prices and makes it unaffordable for young people to have a good life. Anyway, that's my rant for tonight, because I think this is a really, really, really important issue. As important in the Greater Toronto Area as climate change is in the world. Thank you for listening and letting me rant. Good night, everybody.